Greetings all. Maybe it's the time of year. Maybe it's the time of man, like Crosby, Stills, and Nash says. I don't know, but I've suddenly started getting more questions about living in Hawaii, buying land in Hawaii. Maybe it's just that the volcanic eruption is over and nobody's scared to come here. It's also the beginning of the summer vacation season where we usually see more people coming over here. I guess it's because, people have kids in school, kids are off, and they tend to take their vacations in the summertime because, well, I tell you, if I was coming from the mainland over here to Hawaii, I'd be taking my vacation in the wintertime, thank you, but to each your own. But I have been getting quite a few contacts as people been stopping in, others that say they have driven by and they saw my sign out here. They will stop in. I've had quite a few questions about buying real estate here again. Now, you all know I'm not a realtor. I'm a horticulturalist. I happen to own land here and I grow stuff on it, and that's about as much as I really know about real estate in Hawaii. But I love to talk about it, so. I've had questions, is $15,000 enough money to buy they referred to it as a safe piece of property in Hawaii? Well, I guess first we have to determine, what is it you're afraid of? So, will the $15,000 keep you away from volcanic eruption? Probably not. Yeah. Will it keep you away from cockroaches and scumbags in a lousy neighborhood? Most likely not. Okay. My suggestion to anybody who's looking over here for property, obviously when you have a list of priorities, the parameters that you're going to use to determine is this the right or the wrong place, the price will be in there somewhere. But frequently what I find is people are putting price at the very top of the list. It really needs to be somewhere down lower. It's the right piece of property you're shopping for, not necessarily the right price. It depends on, what your acceptance level is. If you don't mind having solid rock underfoot that you can't put a shovel in, if you don't mind having the place completely covered with strawberry guava to such an extent that you cannot step between the stems and will have to use a bulldozer even to just go in and open the place up so you can see from one corner to the other. If it's acceptable to you that the place may have a legal easement but no access, these are all factors. And again, if it's acceptable to you that you may live in a neighborhood where your neighbors are less than desirable, meth heads and whatever. Always the lowest priced real estate is, generally speaking, the worst location. And so I suggest shopping by location, not by price. Okay. Start somewhere at the top of the price here in Puna or in Hilo and work your way down until you find something rather than starting at the bottom end and going up. I know that because there is quite a bit of land here in Puna that sells quite cheap, surprisingly cheap. That's a draw. People are attracted to this. I recommend you don't find yourself attracted to the lower price points. They have all sorts of problems. Good friend of mine purchased a piece here a while back, 3 acres, in a very good location, actually. It's got county asphalt blacktop and utilities running by one side of the property. And it's got some private blacktop going halfway down the other side of the property. It's in a location that has fairly good commercial potential. And he only paid $28,000, I believe, for it a couple years back. And I encouraged him. I said, yeah, the location is right, Now, what was underfoot's another story, because I'm not sure, because I haven't asked him, but it looks pretty close that by now, just to get one of the acres out of 3 set so that he could put a house on it, on a house pad, and so he could do some planting, and so he got fences around it and that. He has probably more than exceeded the original investment price on that property in the development price that he's had to go through, because it was so much work to try to get this so that it was right. You could be faced with all sorts of things on cheap land that you would never have anticipated. Everything you think you learned about real estate in the mainland probably doesn't apply here in Hawaii. It's a 101 learning experience. In my friend's case, what had happened to him was that the place had lava flow over it, a lot of pohoihoi lava and some but the lava flow had a lot of pukas, that is, holes, bubbles that were created, pockets in lava, and it's next to a creek, and over the years, alluvium from the creek had overflowed during floods, and the soil had moved into the pukas. Well, that was a problem, because the great big machines would go down in the soil because it was soft and mucky and get trapped in the pukas and couldn't work. And the little machines could handle the soft stuff in the pukas but couldn't move the hard stuff. And so he ended up having to use 3 different separate types of machinery just to get the 1 acre so far. The other 2 were as they were. Eventually he may actually get them all done. By the time he gets them prepared, nice, looking good, my thought is he will probably have paid about what it cost me to buy this place right here, that didn't have any pukas, didn't have any lava, and was real easy to push the soil around to put the house in. We had 0 problems in developing on this site. It was so easy to develop that the contractors literally were done so quickly they had nothing better to do. So they built the driveway for me, they trenched my water line in, they did a whole bunch of different things around here that weren't necessarily part of the plan, nor were they part of the contract. Just because it was so easy to work this place. They're used to having to work on really hard rock and stuff, It takes them hours and hours to get anything done. They get into a place like this, is like playing in a sandbox. So, you could be faced with so many different types of situations when it comes to the cheapest land that's here. I will list them off. Okay. Generally speaking, the cheapest land is a high volcanic hazard. On Hawaii, if you look, the USGS volcano observatories have created lava zone mapping for this island, and it runs as a 1 to 10 scale, and 1, of course, is the most dangerous place to live because of lava flows, and 9 and 10 are the safest places. Most of the island sits usually between 3 and 5, at least on this side. Between zones 3 and 5 on lava is pretty good bet that you're going to have a nice place to live, and it's not going to be a big problem. You may be able to see the lava from your house, like we can here when it erupts, but we have no danger from the lava. So I'm in 3. This is lava zone 3. So lava zone, first thing I'd consider, I see no good reason why anybody would ever really want to develop in one of the more forbidding lava zones. It just doesn't make sense, because there's plenty of property here that's in places where you can have safety and comfort and enjoy your life without running from molten rock rolling down a mountain. A second thing that you'll probably be faced with when you're buying a piece of low-cost property is, chances are, whatever it is that's underfoot, whether it's covered with vegetation or whether it's open and exposed, chances are whatever is down there is going to be pretty darn hard. Now, lava, which is the foamy, sharp stuff, Lava is actually fairly good material for growing on if you're growing, say, coffee or fruit trees and things like that. A lot of plants, all the Kona coffee here is grown on lava, and is the best one. There is Pohoihoi lava also. These terms are official geological survey terms to deal with volcanism, but they are derived from Hawaiian language. I love A'a. It's a accent mark A, which is the sound a person makes while walking around barefoot on that type of lava flow. So it's it's a good one. USGS adopted it from the Hawaiian language for that type of lava. Pohoihoi is the smooth, ropey stuff. Looks like the top of a pan of brownies, or it looks like a cow pie dried in the sun, whatever. It's smooth, swirly looking stuff. Pohoihoi will also grow plant material, but it's harder, denser, does not have the air spaces, and so it isn't recommended. A friend of mine had half and half Pohoihoi on his dragon fruit farm, and none of the cacti performed as well with Pohoihoi underneath. Okay. And so, picking what it is that might be under your foot, that can be really important, because most of the folks listening to this channel, you're gardeners, you're growing stuff. And, there is actually some lava here that is so hard and so dense, I'd call it blue basalt. It is a rock. There's very little foam to that. Kapua Farm Lots, with the crazy name for a place that's solid rock, has some of the hardest rock on the island. It's just down the street here. Where and what you have underneath can vary dramatically within feet and definitely within miles. What you have underfoot, if you're planning to do a lot of growing, boy, I recommend you be looking for a parcel that's got earth under it rather than the lava. You can work with the lava, but you're going to spend a lot of money preparing it. You're going to have to bring in a big old D9 cat, and they're going to have to go through and rip the lava, and then the lava will have to be graded. After the grading, then you're going to have to cinder the surface, and cinder's not cheap when you start talking about an acre's worth of it or more. And so the expense to prepare the cheap land is high. It's pretty high. And so one way or another, you will pay the bill. So even if the land looks cheap, you can start to calculate what it's going to cost you to get it so that you can put in a cesspool, so that you can put in a driveway, so that you can even get a culvert chopped in out at the road, because maybe you're dealing with hard lava. You can't just put a shovel in there, and so on. So there's a lot of stuff to consider. Clearing land here that is covered in junk wood is also an expensive and somewhat dangerous proposition. There's a tree here that we've been working on trying to kill off because it's weak, it breaks in windstorms, called Albizia. Some of the parcels you'll see are just completely covered in Albizia. Well, if you're not familiar with the plant, you may go, oh, look, pretty trees. But boy, you don't want to start building under them, because they're going to come down the first windstorm, go right through your roof, break your car windshield, smash the doghouse and whatnot. And so they need to be 100% removed. There isn't going to be any living between the albizias. We have a plant called strawberry guava here, locally known as Vivy. That thing's a noxious weed. It is everywhere, and as I said earlier, it can be this far apart across an entire parcel. You can't even. I can't get my fat belly between some of that stuff. It's like a bamboo forest, and you have to cut it all down, and then you have to get the roots out of the ground. And it's a heck of a lot of grubbing. You don't want it around, believe me. It does have some value. The wood is fairly hard. You can make furniture, chairs, and whatnot out of it. You can build some trellises and different things from the material. It makes fairly good firewood, and you could also use it to make biochar, so there is some value in it. But this place here was covered in grass. And boy, I'll tell you, it was nothing like dealing with the grass compared to what some of these folks have to go through when they got jungle with vines and trees and whatnot. We have several other weed trees here, like like cecropias and melokia. We have the gunpowder tree. That's another one that cracks. That's why they call it gunpowder. Crack, 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 crack. Every time the wind blows. And again, those all have to be rogued out. I see folks come here and go, oh, it's a forest. We're going to do a food forest and leave the standing plants. Well, the standing plants, in most cases on this island, below 4,000 feet, the majority of them are stinking weeds. There is no native vegetation on a lot of the property below 4,000 feet here. There is the ohia tree, and it exists from the coastline to the top of timberline in the mountains. It's an excellent hardwood tree. It's native to Hawaii. It's culturally significant, and it's all dying because of a rapid ohia death that's gotten here. It's two different diseases being spread around by the ambrosia beetle. And so most of the ohia is dying. And so if you buy a ohia forest, which is a decent native Hawaiian forest, chances are if you're going to watch it pass away, and so you're going to have a lot of removal. Now, in the case of ohia, you can't take it out to get it sawed anywhere. It has to lay exactly where it came down. Because they don't want the disease spreading. So again, it can become a liability when you buy a large plot of ohia, even if it's still alive. Right here around my house, we haven't seen any ohia death, but further down the mountain, in some of the subdivisions, there are places where it's 100% dead already. Just another thing to concern yourself with is that the preparation cost of the land. The other is to make sure that there is actually an easement, and personally, I wouldn't even just go with the easement. It had better have a decent road going into it, because there's a lot of place here that it doesn't. So accessibility, number 3, can be a real issue. Even when there are roads in the subdivisions, oftentimes the roads are private. And it means they're owned by the homeowners association and the subdivision. So if you own land in there, technically you kind of own part of the roads, but everybody argues over what will be done with them. The county doesn't come in and repair them, so when the roads go to heck, they oftentimes stay that way and keep getting worse, because there are people that live in some of these subdivisions that like it when the roads have gone completely to heck, because then no one goes back in there. I won't. I've been called into several places to look at property with people that was just too far back in the woods on crummy private roads full of potholes and stuff. And I'm not going to waste my car going in there. I know a good friend of mine here who has wasted several automobiles because he purchased a cheap piece of property that was on the most atrocious road you can imagine. And he broke all sorts of vehicles going in and out of there. He goes through a steady string of them. So it's another expense, car damage, as far as the roads are concerned. I highly recommend purchasing land whenever possible that's on county-owned roads. That way the tax dollars will pay for the maintenance of the roads. I live on a county road. I'm so happy about it. The county comes by and mows the shoulders for us. The county sprays weeds. The county puts asphalt into potholes. I get several patrols of law enforcement every day that come by because it's a county road. It's a lot of advantages. So then the other consideration is utilities or all manner of infrastructure. A large portion of this island does not have phone lines, internet, electricity, water lines, and they definitely no sewer either. And so Be prepared on a lot of these parcels that you will probably, on the cheaper ones, you will have to dig a septic field, that's for sure. That's going to cost you. You're going to have to install catchment for water, because there's no way you're ever going to get water lines from the county back into some of these places. That isn't going to happen. A lot of places have absolutely no electricity. Well, having solar is fine. Solar is great, because energy here in Hawaii is the most expensive in the United States. Electricity is expensive as all get out, and so is gasoline. And so you will find it's much cheaper if you run the house and the car off the sun. On the other hand, it doesn't cost much of anything to get hooked up to an electric wire here. In other words, the county will get you, or the power company will hook you up for a very minimal charge. On the other hand, figure, even the most minimal solar system, you've probably got at least 15 grand tied up in that. And the one we'll be putting up over here, that's going to be, over $40,000. So you can take these prices and add them to whatever that property costs. If there's no utilities nearby, you're going to have to create your own, And, if you got cable running by, or if you've got phone lines running by, then you have an ability to connect to internet without having to bounce a satellite signal. But there are people here that have to use satellites to have internet. I have a friend who uses a gigantic microwave tower to have internet. We have just a conventional DSL off the phone line here. So, this is important today. There's a whole lot of places that do not have high-speed internet back there yet. They're working on it. There have been some government grants, but I wouldn't hold my breath. As far as if it isn't there now, you're going to be stuck using your cell phone or something. And that's another issue too, is cell phones, because not all cell services have coverage over all of this island. And we get a lot of people come here from the mainland with cell services that don't work worth a darn here. The best two to have around here is Verizon or Mobi. PCS Mobi runs off of Verizon's towers, and that gives you the best coverage. You can get by with those services here. If you got anything else, chances are it's going to be spotty. So these are other issues, things that you might have been used to in the mainland. Well, for instance, if you didn't have public access to water, you just put in a well, right? Yeah, well, good luck doing that here. So the other consideration too, and that's so much location. There are locations on this island that are, as they say, to die for, that are paradise, okay? That have mountain and ocean views with 1,000-foot high waterfalls, and rushing crystal clear rivers and blah, 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 and the sound of surf and in virgin forests, there are some of the most fabulous property here. And then there's some of the junkiest land I've ever run across also here on the island. Well, you can figure. The stuff that's on the high end of the price point, it's the nice stuff. The stuff that's on the low end of the price point, it's the stuff that most of us don't want. And so if it isn't just all the vegetation you got to clear and the junk wood that's growing and the fact that it's solid rock underneath and that there may be no utilities and maybe it doesn't even have an easement or a decent road that goes into it for that low price. On the other hand, it can also then be in a neighborhood, in an area where the people you're living with are not the kind of people you really want to live with. Cheapness generally attracts kind of a lower echelon group. Most of the people who had a little bit of money buy the better land, live in better areas. This place here was actually twice what I had to spend. I was hoping not to have to spend all the money I had to buy this place, but it turned out once I found the place, and this is what I'm saying, it's place, folks, it's location, it's not price, okay? Because if you go with price as being your determining criteria, you may end up with a cheap price you paid once, but you're going to have a miserable time with the property for the rest of your life, whereas the price you pay it only one time, and in my case it's paid off. I don't owe any money on this place at all, so I could care less what I paid for it. Didn't matter. It's the right place. So this one here, it was twice what I actually had, and I didn't even want to pay that full price, but I ended up having to borrow the other half to be able to acquire this property. And of course, a note on borrowing money on land, banks in general will not make any kind of loans on vacant land in Hawaii. There are some finance organizations and things around here that will, but when they do it, it's going to be on a 3-year with a balloon, and that's what happened to me. I managed to get the money, I got the property, but after 3 years, when I'd only paid off a small portion of the money, suddenly it ballooned, and I had to do something, so we had to roll this over to a 30-year builder's loan so that I could get both better rate of interest and a longer term to get myself dug out of debt on it. So that's when we put the house up. So then I really went into debt. Not only borrowed on half of the price of the land, but then I borrowed to get money to build this house. Like I said, today, it's paid for. Doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. I have to write things down to find out what it is that I actually paid for stuff in the past, because if it suits the function, what it cost is irrelevant. I'm stressing this. I really am. I'm stressing it. If cheapness is your first priority, then that is exactly what you will end up with. Is a cheap place. If you're looking for quality and location, which is what I suggest, then you're going to probably end up with a quality piece of land and a good location that you'll really be happy for the rest of your life. That you did that. So, location, and the neighbors. That's another criteria. I have questions from people about crime here. I guess there's a reputation or something that the island is crime infested, and no, that's not really true. We do not have more crime here than you'll find in most of the rest of the U.S., and in general we have less of it. Now we have certain specific types. Burglary and car theft can be pretty bad here, especially with tourists. People leave a laptop or a purse in a car where it can be seen. There are cockroaches here that are going to be drawn to that. They'll prey on people's silliness and carelessness. There is a problem with meth here. I have myself not personally run across any of these people that I'm aware of, because I don't live in the kind of an area where that sort inhabits, but I know they're here, and I see them in the newspaper and on the news all the time, running from the cops or shooting at them or whatever. So they do exist, and they will generally exist in the lower rent districts, okay? Cheaper the price of the property, the cruddier the type of neighborhood you get yourself involved in. It's just that simple. And I have people ask me what it's like to live here. I've mentioned this before, that I never had any intention of living here in Hawaii. This was not one of my goals or dreams in life. It just kind of happened. One thing led to another, and this became my path, and so I followed it, and I have no complaints. I'm so glad that this laid itself out for me. If there is one thing about living here that I really love, and it is the weather. It's the weather. You seldom ever get cold here. At least, even at 1,600 feet up the mountain, a sweatshirt is about all that's required during the worst part of the year. So, a little bit of clothing, an extra blanket is all that's required. We don't have to use air conditioning at this elevation. I don't have to use a heater. A little further up the mountain, you probably want a small wood stove. If you live in Volcano, for instance, it gets pretty cool in the wintertime. The weather is probably the primary reason why I just love being here. Obviously, we can grow things year round. That's great. Hilo is the wettest city of its size in the United States of America and the second largest city in the state of Hawaii. Hilo generally gets around 120 inches of rainfall a year. For those of you who live in the mainland, where you probably get between 12 and 40 inches, unless you live in Florida, you maybe get a little bit more, 60 or so. That sounds like a lot of rain. I guess it is. I wasn't sure about it myself. I grew up where we got, 30 to 40 inches in the upper Great Lakes. And so we're talking 3 times the rainfall. And Mountain View gets a little bit more. We'll measure out about 150 up here. Well, the soil drains like sand. All right. And if we didn't get as much rain as we do, chances are our plants would struggle. And we wouldn't be able to grow things as well here. The amount of rain we get is probably a little more than we actually need, but it's definitely plenty enough to grow most crops that human beings will eat without artificial irrigation. So, in a way, the weather here is exactly perfect for the kind of foods that most people eat. So I guess it's the right weather for people. I don't know. It's an odd thing. I like the rain. It reminds me of when I lived in the upper Midwest, and especially in the wintertime when we'd get trapped in the house. I'd have to read books or write stories or play guitar or do whatever because it was just so nasty outside. Here, the weather is never nasty, but sometimes it rains quite a bit, and so I will get trapped in the house and play guitar. And I enjoy it. I appreciate it. After years in California, when the weather was always perfect to do stuff, I was always having to do stuff. I kind of enjoy the more laid-back thing here with the way the weather will sometimes keep you in the house. It's also a good lullaby. So I guess there's another one, trying to figure out whether or not you can put up with the weather here, because the weather is extremely mild. But on the other hand, the weather in Hawaii changes within a mile. This is not the kind of weather you're familiar with if you come from the mainland United States or the central United States, where the weather in Springfield, Illinois is about the same as in Aurora, Illinois is about the same, is in Beloit, Wisconsin, or whatever. The weather doesn't change that much. Gets a little cooler as you go north, a little warmer as you go south, a little drier as you go west, But that's about it. Here, because of the elevation changes, we go up to almost 14,000 feet in 2 spots. We have almost every band of climate that exists on the face of the earth. Snow all winter long up on top of the mountain, maybe even permanently frozen soil in the shadows, tropics at the shore, and everything in between. And just changing location by a little bit can make the weather change completely. And so as you're shopping for real estate here, you want to pay close attention to what elevation are you at, because the higher up you go, usually the worse it rains. And what side of the island are you on? Okay, because the west side tends to be drier and the east side tends to be wetter. But, wetter on the east side means maybe like 60 inches down in Kalapana, but maybe 320 inches a year at the top of the Waipio Valley and everything in between. The west side of the island, maybe 70 inches a year over a lot of it, but as you start getting up into Kahala, it drops to 6 inches a year. That's pure desert. That's drier than Phoenix. So it's quite variable, and just moving from one spot to another here, just a few miles apart, can make a dramatic difference. This is another thing to consider. What weather do you put up with? We're up here at 1,500, 1,600 feet because I like the cloud buildup during the afternoon hours. Just when it's going to start to get too hot, the clouds come in overhead here and begin to cool the land down. It's a very, very comfortable place to live for me. I very seldom ever overheat, almost never get cold. I get wet a lot, and mostly it doesn't bother me, but to some people, wet will keep them trapped inside a building. And so if you find getting wet to be not to your advantage, well, then you probably don't want to live in Puna or Hilo. That's for sure. I wouldn't recommend the east side of the island, period, if you don't like being wet. We grow moss on our backs around here. So then there's the culture. And it depends. We got culture all the way from thieves and drug addicts running all the way on out through international professional astronomer community, fabulous artists that are here. Hawaiian musicians are top notch, for instance. So we have quite a spread. There's quite a spread here in culture. In general, the Big Island has a pretty good aloha culture, and people tend to take care of each other pretty well, mostly. I get a lot of friendship, a lot of help here, and I don't get a lot of negativity from people and so on. But I'm part of the local community here ever since the first day, I guess. This was a place I suppose I was just supposed to be because I seemed to have fit into a niche that was wide open, raising food that people needed, raising the plants that they needed, and so on. And so I don't get a lot of grief from anybody around here. Everybody seems to like the fact that I'm part of the community. And this is important because we're all alone here on an island out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. We're 2,500 miles away from everywhere. And if you thought you wanted to come here to try to hide out from people, it's probably not the best place. I'd try Chicago. I lived in Chicago for years. You could be completely anonymous and know no one in Chicago and be there for years and no one will even care whether you're alive or not. If you want to disappear, move to Chicago. If you want to have everybody know your business, and move to Hawaii, because this is definitely small town. It's actually small state. I mean, it's so rural in general, and people are nosy, and also people care about each other too. So, everybody's got their nose in everybody else's business. So we got the Coconut Telegraph here. If you're feeling like you want to hide from the world, this ain't the place. It's not. Because in general, the only way you're really going to be happy in Hawaii, I think, is that when you contribute to the community and you become part of everything that happens here. It's a great place. Got a lot of good things going on here. And by being an active part of it in one way or another, somehow, and helping the neighbors, joining hands, making it family or ohana, it gives you the best of the experience. So then when it comes to income, I mean, obviously all of us need to have an income. Hawaii's got a very low unemployment rate, okay? I don't know what the current number is right now, but we tend to be better than a lot of the U.S. I seem to be able to find jobs for just about anybody around here, even if you can't walk and chew gum, maybe they give you a job as a sweeping floors or cleaning up the lot at the gas station. I don't know, but there seems to be everybody who wants to work here can work. That seems to be the truth. On the other hand, cost of living here is as high as it is in most places I've ever been. Yeah, the employment issue, we don't have a lot of industry here. And so factory type jobs that might be available on the mainland, not really. We do have light industry associated to the astronomy community. So if you're a machinist, for instance, it can help build parts for telescopes. There's probably a job. If you're an astronomer, this is a hot place, If you do, research in oceanography or marine sciences, again, it's another great place for it. It's a really good place if you want to go into farming crops that ordinarily wouldn't be able to be raised in the mainland, like vanilla or like cacao or like coffee. These are all crops that are farmed here, and so if you're a farmer, it's possible to get into. In general, I believe that the economy in Hawaii, on this island, tends to support the entrepreneurial spirit much better than the person who is reliant on going to others looking for work. Now there is work, there's construction here, and there's truck driving, and there's all the stuff that you usually know. You can drive a taxi cab if you want to, and so on. But in general, the money that comes through here is actually huge. There's a lot of money flowing through this economy. It comes from Korea, it comes from Japan, it comes from Germany, it comes from Canada, it comes from all over the United States. The tourism aspect of our culture here brings money flowing through this economy constantly in the hot little hands of tourists who are just dying to spend it on something fun, and so people will be glad to give you their money if you have the right net. You got to have the right net to catch it, and if you want to make a lot of money here in Hawaii, chances are that's probably how you're going to do it, although there are other ways. But being an entrepreneur is something that's very solid here on this island. We have a lot of people that hustle, that, make hemp clothing, people that carve wood, bowl makers, people that work with glass, you name it. Anyway, so there's just a little bit. I have had people asking me again, about buying land here, about what's it like to live in Hawaii. So it's either the time of year or the time of man. And so there's another one of Bill's talks about living on the Big Island. Aloha, y'all hang loose. Have a nice vacation this summer.